Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Rozak Burton, and I'm delighted to be with you today in this virtual environment. I wish we could be together and able to go to see an Oriole game after the convention, but we're doing the best we can in the current situation. But I'm delighted to be back for the second time, and today's topic is the neuroscience of gratitude and what it can teach us about diversity and inclusion. Our objectives for today will be to translate the latest research and science of gratitude and why it's important in the nursing environment, and to review the correlates of gratitude in neuroscience and its positive impact on diversity and inclusion. If we were together, I would be asking you to raise your hand if you can say yes to any of the following questions that might be warning signs that your organization does need more gratitude. Someone in your organization has a disgruntled attitude. I usually get a lot of head nods and a lot of people saying yes. How about this? Someone in your organization is constantly complaining and finger pointing and blaming. I get a lot of yeses for this one as well. And finally, someone in your organization only finds gratitude one day of the year, and that's usually Thanksgiving. Our agenda for today: gratitude really is the motivating force behind creating a greater positive work environment and increasing diversity and inclusion. The neuroscience behind it really does allow us to achieve potential that we perhaps didn't think was quite possible. You know, one survey that I read said that 60% of the employees never or rarely express gratitude at work. And 74% said they rarely or never express gratitude to their boss, although they said if their boss would express gratitude to them, 81% of them said they would work harder. And yet we have a fundamental human need to be acknowledged for our existence. So gratitude has a lot to offer. The common definition of gratitude is an affirmation of goodness in your life and a recognition of goodness outside of yourself. Gratitude also engages three aspects of our brain. First, we intellectually recognize that we've received a benefit, and we willingly acknowledge that we have received a gift, and we emotionally appreciate the gift or the giver. It must be perceived as a genuine effort. We're very, very good at spotting something that's disingenuine. So when someone expresses gratitude to us, does something for us, it must be genuine and usually tied to a value that we feel is important in life. It's a strength. It's considered a memory of the heart. Roman philosopher Cicero considers gratitude to be the virtue of all virtues, the parent of all virtues. The wonderful thing about gratitude is that it blocks toxic emotions. I can't be envious or angry and grateful at the same time. The brain just doesn't work that way. And for us to talk about gratitude, we have to talk for a minute about positive psychology. You know, when positive psychology first started to hit the mainstream, you would see people talking about happy, smiling faces, emojicons, just be happy. But what positive psychology is actually complementary to traditional psychology. And you know, just as good health is not the absence of disease, and being fearless is not the absence of fear, positive psychology is not the absence of pain and suffering. The definition for positive psychology is a scientific study of the strengths that enable institutions and communities and institutions to thrive. And I have this website there for University of Pennsylvania, has some wonderful resources and assessments. if you want to look further into positive psychology. So here are two very common definitions of inclusion and diversity. I actually flipped this to have inclusion first and diversity second, because if we can hardwire the behaviors, the ways of thinking to be more inclusive, we've got a better chance at creating greater diversity in our organization. But I want to first start by telling you a story. One of the things that really prevents us from creating greater diversity and inclusion are unconscious biases that we have that come to us because we're human. So here's my story. A short while ago, I had to have minor surgery. And as I walked into the outpatient center, I was greeted by the registration person. And after filling out all the necessary paperwork, I was directed back to the pre-op area and greeted by a very friendly staff person who then directed me to my bay, gave me instructions, and told me that the surgeon and the anesthesiologist would soon be in to speak with me. And as the surgeon was leaving, the anesthesiologist walked in, and I completed the final documentation. I'm happy to tell you everything went very well. And as I was coming out of recovery, I was greeted by another staff member who handed me a bottle of water, checked in on me. Not too much later, I was transported by a wheelchair, of course, to meet up with my partner who was waiting for me. So I want to go back over this story and ask you a couple of questions. When I said I was greeted by the registration person, how did you visualize this person? And when I was taken back by a friendly staff person to my bay, how did you visualize that person? Man, woman? And when I mentioned the surgeon or the anesthesiologist, how did you visualize them? Was it a specific gender? And then when I was taken by wheelchair, how did you visualize the person pushing my wheelchair? And when I mentioned meeting up with my partner, how did you visualize this person? I give this as an example of the images that our brain creates when we're listening to a story. And it does create a greater awareness of the unconscious biases that we all have. And actually, that's part of the process of being more inclusive and more diverse, is really looking at what unconscious biases are filtering through our conversations, through our decisions, through our judgments. I want to show this picture to you, share it with you. Think about your first reaction to these individuals. Who are they? What unconscious biases might we be identifying? And then look at the same group of men in this picture. So those were the 7 Mercury astronauts in one of their training missions, not quite looking like they look when they're in their space gear. So let's quickly just identify a few of the unconscious biases that are always present, whether at work or in our neighborhood, in our community. Unconscious biases encompass race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, age, weight, persons living with HIV, disability, people that might be impacted by drug abuse. Confirmation bias is when we look at the facts that confirm our beliefs and ignore the facts that invalidate our opinions. The 2018 financial crisis with the subprime mortgage crisis before that, that has been blamed on confirmation bias. The financial analysts disregarded other opinions, other facts that would have predicted what actually occurred. Similarity bias. Our brain loves certainty. And so we are automatically looking for friend or foe. And if we find somebody that's similar to us, then we think, well, people like me are better than others. Expedience bias. We quickly come to decisions, quickly come to judgments. And that's because we found out that our brain has two systems of thinking. System one is very quick, very fast, and that's actually how we think 80% of the time. System two is called the slow brain, or the fast way of thinking, a slow way of thinking, sorry. It's more deliberate, more thoughtful. It takes more time. And sometimes in the medical profession, we don't have a lot of time. But gratitude is something that we really have to be very deliberate and thoughtful about how we are recognizing people, how often we need to recognize people. And experience bias is when we take our perceptions to be the absolute truth. So if I yelled at somebody, I could tell you that it's because it was a very stressful day and that I was very tired. I didn't sleep well the night before. But if someone else behaves in that same way, I might likely say they act that way because they're a bully. So you can see how this really alters how we think. A few more insights into the brain. We have a built-in negativity bias. So that's kept us alive, right? It's our survival mechanism. And it's absolutely impossible to deconstruct old wiring. Those neural pathways are well traveled. But neuroplasticity tells us that we can create new wiring or strengthen existing pathways. And unfortunately, there's over 100 unconscious biases that we are merely aware of when we stop to think about it. The ability to intentionally address the social brain, but I include the grateful brain, is the service of optimal performance that will be a distinguishing leadership capability in the years ahead. We used to think that gratitude was a very simple emotion. It's receiving a nice thing. But actually, when we know what the brain activity looks like when we are in a state of gratitude, we find out that it's a very complex social emotion. It's not just about lighting up the reward centers of our brain, but it involves moral cognition and subjective value judgments, fairness, economic decision making. It allows us to connect with others and take their perspective. All of this we now know because we can see what the brain looks like under functional MRIs. First and foremost, the brain looks at the workplace as a social system. And when the social brain is triggered by feelings of being ignored, devalued, humiliated, or ostracized, the physical pain centers of our brain are activated. It is actually as if we had a physical blow to our head. The brain has one organizing principle, and that is there's two emotional states. Threat, which is the fight, flight, freeze emotional state, or reward, where we're safe, we're proactive. The best way to think about how to shift from the threat to the reward state is this acronym called SCARF. Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So Our status will either create our staff or our employees to go to the threatened response or the reward response. So if we wanted to use gratitude to increase the reward response, then giving positive feedback, positive recognition to employees in public, or maybe giving them the opportunities to learn or to attend a training, keeps them in a reward state towards our status. Our brain loves certainty. So if we are expressing gratitude or recognition to someone, it makes the implicit explicit, being very, very specific about what we're recognizing. Here's the wonderful thing about the brain. When we explicitly, specifically recognize somebody for something that they're doing, that we are really appreciative of their contribution, our brain seeks more of that. Autonomy, nothing makes an employee feel more trusted and valued if we're able to give them some autonomy. And relatedness, finding those safe connections to recognize our team efforts. Fairness, one of the fastest ways to erode workplace trust is by giving unequal recognition. It doesn't mean that we recognize everyone the same way, but that we are able to recognize everyone in the way that works best for what they are contributing. When we look at how the neuroscience aligns with the actions and feelings and behaviors that come from feeling grateful, expressing gratitude, being grateful, it says some really important things. If we're recognizing our employees, we gain the respect and trust because it says to our employees, I see you, I care about you. We also know that practicing gratitude improves pro-social behaviors. So gratitude research tells us that it creates a moral barometer, that we perceive someone is doing something for us, some moral action that they are taking to help us. And that in fact, it's a moral motivator, that we behave and reciprocate those behaviors in moral actions, and that it's a reinforcer. That is to say that acting grateful and expressing gratitude reinforces future behaviors of people on our team. It has been shown to create more, create more creativity and innovation. Sorry about that. Got tongue-tied there. Because there's an openness. Once we have moved to the reward centers of our brain, we diminish any of the fight, flight, freeze response, the amygdala firing up and keeping us from really getting to the creative executive functioning part of our brain. It also allows us to get to the hero impact, that we are helping our employees create hope, tapping into their self-efficacy, helping create greater resilience, and helping them become more optimistic, and that they are more grateful, more collaborative, sorry. I have another slide that I didn't include in this slide deck where it shows that the Gallup Q12 engagement questions are neurologically aligned with different levels of engagement, all the way from actively disengaged to actively engaged. So these are hardwired habits that we can create through gratitude and creating greater inclusion. So for example, look for and express gratitude when you find common ground with people who appear different. That's really tapping into the relatedness that we can find with other individuals. If you're a leader and you're finding common grounds with your employees or other members of the organization, you're really creating a very rewarding state through your status. Or ask for and express gratitude for new ideas and experiences, including them into our team meetings and into our interactions. Expressing gratitude for specific individual contributions. That's where that specificity comes in. Express gratitude when someone helps or supports you or someone on your team. The law of reciprocity is this: when you do something nice for me, when you do something good for me, I will respond and do something good as well. And it's not always right back to the person that has done something kind for you. The law of reciprocity allows us to do it for others. Express gratitude to the invisible people in your organization. We pass by individual people all the time. So think of someone in your organization, you don't sign their time card, you don't sign their paycheck, but they do contribute to the overall contributions of your organization. Here's what I always recommend. Find that invisible person that you often walk by, sometimes say hello, maybe sometimes too busy, but express your gratitude to them for something that they do give to the organization. And then look at how they respond and how you, in fact, respond when you express that gratitude for them. And gratitude and diversity. Again, if you can hardwire those benefits, those habits that we just talked about for inclusion, the ability to create greater diversity is even strengthened. So ask for and express gratitude for diverse perspectives based on the different cultures of people that are on your team or in your organization. Ask for and express gratitude for diverse backgrounds. What have their past team experiences been about? How can those experiences, those different ways of working together, how can that perhaps create greater teamwork? And invite diverse members of your organization in for input on a project that you might be working on, and express gratitude for their different points of view. It may not be that you take in all of their points of view, but you've been able to listen and express that appreciation for their different perspectives. Always lead by example and express gratitude fairly and genuinely when you are expressing gratitude to someone. So here's the other part of the warning signs that we talked about before. The quote, gratitude is a vaccine, an antitoxin, and an antiseptic. A vaccine against the invasion of a disgruntled attitude, an antitoxin against the poison of fault-finding and grumbling, finger-pointing, blaming, and a soothing antiseptic in the spirit of thanksgiving. And finally, a couple of action steps for you. What one idea from today's presentation can you begin to implement at work and promote more diversity and inclusion through expressing and receiving gratitude? And what vital behaviors are going to be required for you to sustain diverse and inclusive gratitude practice in your nursing culture. I always suggest that we take a look at 2 or 3 vital behaviors that will help you sustain gratitude and create those habits of inclusion to create greater diversity. One thing to do when you're identifying these behaviors is to avoid saying what you're not going to do or what you won't do, but in fact eliminate that negative and respond with what you are going to do. Please contact me. Feel free to email me or give me a call or go to the website. If you have any questions about today, I'd love to respond to them. And I want to close on this closing quote. Gratitude bestows reverence, allowing us to encounter everyday epiphanies, those transcendent moments of awe that change forever how we experience life and the world. Thank you very much for your time. I'm grateful that we've been able to share today.